What's going on, everybody? This is John Jake Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the FCS Dynasty here on NCAA 06, featuring that NCAA Next mod that was created by some great people. And we are out here, man. We got a special episode on tap. We are going to have the full off-season recap. You know I love to go deep dive in this, so you're going to want to get that popcorn out and you're going to want to enjoy yourself because we got a lot in this episode. You know, we're going to take a look at some recruiting classes. We're going to take a look at, you know, how certain teams did over the course of the year. We're also going to take a look at award winners and All-Americans. And of course, saying all of this, also got to point out that we're also going to take a look at some information in terms of how you guys can specifically be involved in this series. So you're not going to want to miss a single thing. I hope you enjoy it all. If you do, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, because that does help me out with the YouTube algorithm. So helping a brother out I really do appreciate it, and it only takes a couple of seconds too. And on top of that, if you're brand new to the channel, you like what you're seeing, make sure you hit that subscribe button, man. I would truly appreciate that as well. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. You know, we are going to hop in. Let's first go check out how these various teams did. We'll start with, we're going to check out the national champ, and we're also going to check out the national runner-up. And the schedule that I am looking for in specifically is New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire, they were off to a great start this year. They finished 16-1. They played 17 games, won 16 of them, and it was a tough. And at first, you know, wasn't sure if they were going to be the undefeated that we saw. They had close games against James Madison and more notably Delaware State. They almost got upset by them. It was either a really close game or they blew teams out of the water. They also beat North Carolina A&T State 42-14 on the road. That was a really good win. That was a team that they played up against that went to the FCS playoffs as well. And then they went on a roll here towards the end, you know, finishing undefeated in the regular season and then conference championship game. That week, that was the only time that they lost in this entire series. They end up losing to Delaware 31-38, and it was a game where Delaware came up with 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, but they were able to rally back. They ended up winning a bunch of games in the FCS playoffs, and eventually culminated in the road to the national championship, winning 27-24. Now, as for Georgia Southern, they went out there and they also went ahead and got rid of some stigmas that are around this program, right? Many people thought that they were overrated as a program, and this year not only winning the SEC championship but also going about and making sure that, hey, we're more than just a conference contender. We can compete for national championships too under Ikeda Woods. But that wasn't completely sure at first, right? So they had this great win against UCF at the time, but then they had a head-scratching loss to Troy, lost 35-7. That was a really confusing thing that we watched unfold. We did see them beat the Citadel in the final AP poll, which we can check out next. They beat them 41-0, so a very convincing win there. Couple of major blowouts along the way, almost losing to Texas State as well. Furman, also a program on the rise. They gave Furman everything it could handle. They only beat them by a field goal. 17-14 was your score there. And of course, Florida A&M, led by Coach Credible, 42-7 to end the regular season before they win the conference championship, and then they eventually go all the way to the national championship before losing on a field goal in the fourth quarter. So what does the final AP poll look like as we are getting ready to wrap up year number 3? Well, obviously you got to have New Hampshire number 1. I mean, that right there, that's all a given. Rice still remains at number 2 in the country, followed by James Madison, number 3, Kent State at 4, Georgia Southern, they are represented as the number 5 team in the nation. San Diego State falls all the way to number 6. They lose in the quarterfinals. they lost to the eventual champs, New Hampshire. As for outside of the top 6, we got Idaho at number 7. They were also there in the quarterfinals. They lost to Rice. North Dakota State is there at number 8. They lost in the quarterfinals as well to Kent State, followed by Akron, who loses in the second round this year to North Dakota State. After that, we got Western Carolina, the highest rated team that did not get an opportunity to play for the FCS National Championship. They will be under probation next year, so they can't compete for year number 4, but for year number 5, they can be eligible for the FCS playoffs. Then we have Texas Southern. They were also under NCAA sanctions. They were Big 12 champions. Same situation for them. They can't compete until year number 5. As for Southeast Missouri State, they will remain at number 12. Utah State is at number 13, the champions of the WAC. 14 goes to Eastern Illinois. They were champions of the Big 10 this year, losing in the first round to Georgia Southern. Temple, they had that first round bye, but they lose in the second round to Idaho pretty convincingly. Eastern Kentucky, meanwhile, they only fall a couple of spots, even though they were blown out of the water by Eastern Carolina. Southern comes in and they also move up 7 spots to number 17, so a lot of momentum for this particular program as well. You love to see it. Same thing for University of Central Florida, even though they did not make the FCS playoffs. New Mexico State at number 19. They're number 19 overall squad in the country, and that is even with a 13-point loss to Rice. And, you know, some teams that snuck into the top 25 as well that maybe we should watch out for in year number 4. Sacramento State, they finished as number 20. Arkansas State at 21. Furman at 22. North Carolina A&T, they're on the rise in spite of a close loss to New Mexico State in the first round of the FCS playoffs. The Citadel, they get in at 24, and then at 25, that last spot, going to Central Michigan. Even though they're the 25th best team in the final AP poll, they still had a really good year, finishing 10-3. Now, speaking of the AP poll, we did have a few more schools that did end up going under NCAA sanctions. So that does mean, you know, for all of these schools I'm going to mention, for years number 4 and year number 5, they will not be able to be eligible for the FCS playoffs because of that. And with that being said, we'll check out these NCAA sanctions now. We'll start with the most notable of all the teams. We got the Yale Bulldogs, who we did see in the FCS playoffs this year. They were the Ivy League champions, and, you know, they were being a little bit questionable, you know, not putting enough discipline points in their team over the course of the season. You know, those off-season budgets, very important, and that NCAA team interest, even with the sanctions, they are sky high right now, so I would watch out for them to get even sanctioned further in the future, maybe not being even allowed to play on national television. For now, they are going to lose 10 scholarships each year for the next 2 years, so they'll be limited to 15 scholarships per year for the next couple of seasons. And that also means they won't be eligible for the NCAA playoffs. So that's a tough look, as Yale did just make their first FCS playoff appearance. But they were not the only school that was actually placed under NCAA sanctions. A couple of other teams, you know, got that axe as well. Northern Colorado as well, representing in the WAC conference. They received the same sanctions as Yale, except for Northern Colorado. They actually not tasted FCS playoff action yet, and they will have to wait until year number 6 due to those NCAA sanctions to happen. In addition, another team trying to turn it around, the Indiana State Sycamores, they also get placed under NCAA sanctions. They will be missing out on year number 4 and year number 5 in terms of the FCS playoffs. Not that the sanctions create much of a difference. They did only finish 1-10 this season, so they had a long way to go before they can think about FCS playoff football. But that's huge for Indiana State because you need all those scholarships you can get to turn your program around, and only having 15 scholarships to work with now, that's a big blow for the Sycamores as they're trying desperately to right the ship. So now we'll take the time to look at the award winners that we have here, and we'll start with the Heisman Trophy real fast. The Player of the Year. First place did go to Robert Johnson. He did end up winning, but I didn't show the order. I saw the Heisman Trophy ceremony to you guys, but did not show you guys the order of which how the Heisman Trophy race finished off. So Robert Johnson won the Heisman this year, but Ikeda Woods does finish in second place. He did lead his team to the national championship. Georgia Southern does finish as the national runners-up. He is a junior redshirt, and he has also won multiple awards to this point. You want to talk about a guy, freshman All-American, and he's been named. He's a two-time All-American now as well. So I'm really curious to see if Ikeda Woods does stay for his senior year, or if he tries his hand at either the NFL or transferring upward to a FBS caliber school. In third place, we got David Thorne, the true sophomore wide receiver, ends up with 2,500 all-purpose yards, 21 total touchdowns. His team did finish in the quarterfinals, where they did lose in a blowout fashion to Georgia Southern. So that was tough to see their season end the way that it did. But David Thorne had a great sophomore season. Ryan Vaughn, the freshman redshirt at quarterback, they actually lose in the quarterfinals as well to New Hampshire, but he does finish fourth in the Heisman race, ends up with 4,200 yards and 41 passing touchdowns. That was only his first year on the field, and he's already proving to be one of the better passers in the FCS. And then rounding out the Group B, one of two players that will be graduating from this Heisman list, we got Micah Williams, the senior redshirt from Western Carolina. He had 2,200 all-purpose yards and 16 touchdowns. Really curious to see. I think he should make it to the NFL. He puts together 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. And on top of that, he's a 96 overall. So you want to talk about a guy that will come out here and, be a potential impact. I'm looking at, even for FCS standards, maybe like a 65 to 70 overall initially. That's really not bad for an FCS player. Someone that could very well see the field at the NFL level in their first year, should he get that opportunity. So, we'll definitely check that out later in the episode, where some of these players go in terms of their NFL aspirations. But then we check out the other award winners, and I kind of spoiled this to a degree in the national championship game when I was showing the starting lineups to you guys. So Ikeda Woods does end up winning the Maxwell Award. He does not win the Heisman Trophy. The finalists are the same Heisman Trophy finalists. Robert Johnson finishes second for the Maxwell, and then Ryan Vaughn, who he does end up finishing third, but is named the first team all-conference nominee. For the Bednarik Award, that actually goes to true freshman Matt King. And Matt King had a really good freshman year, 99 tackles, 26 TFLs, 9 sacks, 3 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles as well. Here's a guy that was all over the field for this South Dakota Coyotes team. And he's a solid overall, 74 overall, hailing from Hollywood, California, doing some good things there out in South Dakota. In second place was Tafita Bean. He is a true sophomore for the now national champ New Hampshire Wildcats. He ends up with over 100 tackles on the year. Half of them were behind the line of scrimmage, 19 sacks and 8 forced fumbles. I'm really shocked he didn't win the Bednarik. And then rounding out the group in third place, we got sophomore outside linebacker Anthony McConnell, playing for Oral Roberts University. He ends up with nearly 100 tackles on the year, 14 of which were TFLs, 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, and 4 forced fumbles as well. And that is an improvement across the board from his stats last season. Something that I also wanted to talk about for the Maxwell was that Mitchell McJones does finish on the semifinalist list. He was a sophomore quarterback from Texas State who finishes in 8th. Also for the Bednarik Award, one of your guys' custom players got on as a true freshman. Smash Woods from Arkansas Pine Bluff finishes 7th for the Bednarik Award. Speaking of that Bednarik, Little Horn Shepherd, the true freshman middle linebacker, he also finishes on that semifinal list, ends up finishing in 10th place. So with all that cleared up, they now have the best quarterback award, and they give that to Joey Ward, the true sophomore from New Mexico State. I'm guessing it just goes to the best true passer, and he was a great passer. 4,700 yards, 45 total touchdowns too. A really good year for Joey Ward. Also in that finalist list was Ryan Vaughn, so another finalist appearance for him. And Terrence Jones, the senior redshirt from Akron, he ends up with 40 total touchdowns on the year, 3,700 total yards as well. He became a first-team all-conference nominee. Also on the best quarterback list was Mitchell McJones, the true sophomore from Texas State. He gets on another semifinalist list, so representing for the Bobcats extremely well. But now we move on to the Walker Award, which goes to the best running back in the country. And this year they will give it to true sophomore Kyle Anderson, who had himself a year, 1,500 yards on the ground. He also had a 30 receiving yards, but he got 20 total touchdowns on the year. Just an absolute complete back. He really improved his numbers from last year. He averaged 7 yards a carry in his first year, and now in year number 3, his second year on the field, he's averaged 9 yards a carry. That is absolutely ridiculous. He is on a completely other level. But with that being said, there was some great running backs throughout the country as well. Roderick Murray being one of them. He ends up with a really good year as well. The sophomore leading Texas Southern to a good year. He ends up with 18 total touchdowns on the season. He was fun to watch in Texas Southern's second year on the field with him. And then rounding out the group is Joan Washington for the finalists. He ends up with 200 carries, 1,200 yards, and 10 touchdowns on the ground. Also chips in 5 receiving touchdowns too, so also a complete back. That being said, the 5'8", 184-pound product from the Citadel, he does graduate after this year. Doesn't have the greatest overall. He is an 86 overall, so we'll see if that does get him to the NFL or not. But either way, obviously wishing him the best of luck in his post-college football endeavors. Up next, we have the best wide receiver in college football, and they give that to Micah Williams, which is no surprise whatsoever because he did finish on the Heisman finalist list. He was one of 2 wide receivers to do that. David Fourn was in there as well, but Michael Williams did a little bit more damage as a wide receiver than David Fourn did, so they give him the best wide receiver award. Sammy Jefferson is in here as well as Jonathan Bauer, both profiting from the great quarterback play that San Diego State got from Ryan Vaughn. Also making on appearance in the semifinalist for the award was 2 of your guys' customs. First, we have the true freshman Jacob Hill, who finished with a great first year, 60 catches for 790 yards and 11 touchdowns as he nearly leads Sacramento State to their first FCS playoff appearance. But also in this list as well is true sophomore Chris Gentry. He ends up with 83 catches for 1,200 yards and also chips in 10 total touchdowns in what was a little bit of a disappointing year for Tennessee Martin here in year number 3. Moving on to the best tight end in the country, they will award this trophy to Tim Martin this year, who was really a red zone threat for the Chippewas this season. He ends up with 26 catches, 550 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Brian Reed was right behind him. He ends up with 32 catches, 562 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But we do also see Brian White make the list too. The Southern Jaguars sophomore tight end, really big body by the way, 6'7", so that makes him a massive target. He ends up with 33 catches on the year, 537 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which does make him a first-team all-conference nominee. As for best offensive lineman in the country, they will give it this year to the sophomore from James Madison, Keith Payne. Protecting a new quarterback is always a challenge, but he made it work as he ends up with 94 pancakes and 4 sacks. Plus, he's got 2 more years of college eligibility, so we'll see if he can get over 100 pancakes. He had a decent freshman year, but then really stepped up his sophomore campaign and he looks like a kid that definitely has what it takes to make it to the NFL someday. As for Joe Rice, I'm actually surprised that they didn't give it to Joe Rice. Maybe a little bit underrated. He ends up with over 100 pancakes on the year, 6 sacks to go with it allowed. So, you know, doing a good job keeping the quarterback clean overall. Remember, he did play in 17 games. But despite that, they only make him a second-team all-conference nominee. So I feel like Joe Rice definitely got snubbed here a little bit. I thought he should have been an All-American, but we should see him back on the field as well. He's already a 90 overall. He's built different. Finally, rounding out the group and will be graduating is A.J. Love. He will finish 3rd place among offensive linemen for this award. He ends up being an all-conference nominee, but he didn't allow a single sack this year. Plus, he has those 88 pancakes as well. So, doing a good job protecting the quarterback. Only allowing 3 sacks the last 3 years, right? So, he may not have the best overall. He's only going to be an 80 overall coming out of school. So, that might stop him from going to the NFL. But, that being said, maybe this is somebody that, you know, could definitely be an offensive line coach someday. Because fundamentally, he does have what it takes to really teach the future of college football. Once again, one of your customs did make this list. However, the true freshman Chris Black, starting at left guard for North Dakota State Bison, he ends up finishing 9th on the list and gets 67 pancakes on the year without allowing a single sack. And we do see that he gets a first-team All-American designation in just his freshman year. Moving on to the Remington Award, which goes to the best center in college football. They give it to Sean Hickman this year. The true freshman from North Dakota State ends up with 26 pancakes on the year. No sacks allowed, but more interesting, his friend Mike gets on here as well. So I'm guessing Bo Scott was the starter and Sean Hickman was the backup. But I guess there was some injury issues between one or the other. So they both get on here. Just really interesting to see that. Bo Scott finishes in 2nd place. He ends up with 32 pancakes and did allow 1 sack on the year. Just really interesting to see that. But then we also have the true freshman Nate Keel in here. He's a first-team all-conference designation. He had 35 pancakes on the year and 4 sacks allowed just in his freshman year, and I expect him to continue to get better as his college career goes on. Moving on to the Lombardi Award, it goes to one of the best defensive linemen in the country, and this year they will give it to true sophomore Ryan Simmons. The Chattanooga product ends up finishing with 14 sacks. He also got an interception, a forced fumble, and 33 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He was simply built different and really helped out this Chattanooga football team in their endeavors of making it to the FCS playoffs for the very first time. Also making the finalist list was Rashad Hearn from Youngstown State. He ends up representing the Penguins extremely well. He ends up with 67 tackles, 17 which were TFLs, also got 8 sacks, and of course a nice forced fumble to go with it. Rashad Hearn, in addition, gets first-team all-conference. And then in 3rd place, we have Josh Noble, who's a first-team all-conference designee as well for the ACC conference. We will go ahead and see him make it as a true freshman as well. He ends up garnering 55 tackles, 14 TFLs, 6 sacks, an interception as a defensive lineman. That's always impressive. And then 2 forced fumbles, which is part of an ascending group of Aggies, as we saw North Carolina A&T State make the FCS playoffs for the very first time. Also making it into the semifinal list, another one of your customs. We got Marshawn Palmer, the true freshman from Eastern Kentucky. Very tall man, 6'7", 245 pounds. He is an imposing figure, and it showed on the football field. He got 2nd team all-conference honors as a true freshman. He gets 49 tackles, 14 of which were TFLs, 6 sacks to go with it, and 2 forced fumbles. Marshawn Palmer had a very solid rookie season in college football. Up next, we have the Best Linebacker Award, and once again, we see Matt King win this award. The true freshmen from South Dakota not only winning the Bernerick Award, but also this Best Linebacker Award. As for the runner-ups, we also see Tavita Bean finish in 2nd place, and Anthony McConnell finished in 3rd place, who were also finalists for the Bednarik. A couple of your customs do also make the best linebacker semi-finalist list. We do see Smash Woods in here once again, the true freshman from Arkansas Pine Bluff, as well as Littlehorn Shepherd, the true freshman from South Carolina State, making it as a middle linebacker for the Bulldogs. Moving forward, we have the Jim Forte Award, which we did see kind of announced and kind of spoiled for that national championship episode. We saw Tim Boyd win it, the true strong safety for the New Hampshire Wildcats, part of that national championship game. He was a ball hawk this year. He ends up with 8 interceptions. He got a few forced fumbles too, a few sacks, plus a defensive touchdown to go with it. Dude was all over the field. So no shock that he ends up winning the Bednarik, or not the Bednarik, but the Jim Forte Award for New Hampshire this year. Also in this group, we got Stephen Green of Texas Southern. He's a true sophomore with 4 interceptions and a forced fumble this year, and does end up receiving Big 12 Conference nominee. He is a first-team All-Conference player. Keeping it in the Big 12 Conference, we got John Weber, the sophomore from Prairie View A&M. The sophomore strong safety had a good year this year. He ends up with 2 sacks, 4 interceptions, and a couple of forced fumbles. Did a little bit of everything for that A&M defense, and he ends up being on that finalist list because of that. Up next, we have the Groza Award, and that goes to the best kicker in college football. They'll give it to Sam Bolden, a senior redshirt from UNLV. He was 19 for 20 on field goals and got all of his extra points. Also getting on this list is Paul Parker. He's also a senior from Rice. Did pretty sound on his field goals and was a first-team All-American. And the youngest finalist that we see this year is sophomore kicker Orlando Davis. The sophomore from Western Kentucky was a first-team All-Conference guy. As for the Best Punter Award, which, as some of you know, did eventually get named Ray Guy, but at the time they only called this the Best Punter. That's going to go to Austin Griffin, the senior redshirt from Eastern Kentucky. Then we do have James Dykes in 2nd place. The senior redshirt was a first-team All-Conference nominee, so you love to see that. And then we have the youngest punter of the finalist group, Alan Taylor, a sophomore from Utah State. He was a 2nd-team All-Conference nominee. As for the best return man in college football, that goes to Mike Sapp this year. He did play in his final collegiate game in that loss to Kent State. And Mike Sapp is an interesting guy. You know, he did not put up very big numbers as a receiver, given that they did not throw the football very often. He did finish with 23 touchdowns, so he did make his opportunities worthwhile, and is a 91 overall, so he could find himself in the NFL. But what could ultimately put him there is his return prowess. This season alone, he ends up with 4 touchdowns in the kick return game, and then in the punt return game, he ends up with 9 touchdowns. So he has 19 touchdowns in punt return for his college career. Very impressive. If Mike Sapp makes it to the NFL, I will say that it's because of his ability to return the football. But this was also a year in which we saw some great return men, one of which was sophomore David Thorne, who ends up with 2,500 yards and 21 total touchdowns. He was a Heisman finalist, and they do give him first-team All-Conference nominee designations. So congratulations to David Thorne, the Heisman finalist. One of your guys' customs did make it onto the finalist list, though. It was Otis Grimp. He was more known for his return prowess, and he had a great start to the season in particular. He ends up with 8 touchdowns in the return game, all of which come on punt returns, but he did have another touchdown in the kick return game as well. Very solid season for him. He finishes in 3rd place, and doing it only as a freshman as well, also garnering 2nd-team All-Conference nominee. Also among the group is another custom of yours, Dante Randolph. He ends up with 2,000 all-purpose yards and 8 total touchdowns on the year. He finishes 6th place for best return man and does end up being a first-team All-Conference nominee. And finally, for the coach of the year, they are going to give it to the head coach of New Hampshire. He did lead his team to a 16-1 record on the year. followed by Rice, who was 14-1. They made their first FCS playoff appearance. Probably could have given it to him because he was working with considerably less, and yet they almost made it to the national championship game. Then the Georgia Southern coach ends up finishing in 3rd place on the year. So you do like to see that. Looking around the group, see if there was anyone else that got in there, and it looks like that is not the case for our custom coaches that were originally a part of this series. So with the award winners out of the way, we'll go ahead and check out the entire All-American list this year. And starting at quarterback, no surprises here whatsoever. It's Ikeda Woods. He does end up being named first team All-American. And what I'm really curious about as we continue through this offseason, does he stay for his senior year or does he go on to greener pastures? So I'm really curious about that. Hard decision either way. I think Ikeda Woods has what it takes to go to the NFL, but that 5'6" frame might stop him either way. If he goes, that would be a massive loss for Georgia Southern. Now for the running backs, Darren Wells of Temple does get named first team All-American. He ends up with 24 total touchdowns on the year, as well as around 1,700 total yards. So a very deserved award for Darren Wells, representing well for the Temple Owls. Also winning first team All-American is Chad Wilson, the sophomore redshirt from Central Michigan. Ends up with 21 total touchdowns on the year and 1,600 yards of total offense. He was really helping out that Central Michigan football team. Then we go to our wide receivers. Joe Horton, the senior from Brown, gets in there. He had a great final year, even though Brown did not make the FCS playoffs this year. He ends up with 96 catches for 1,300 yards, and he also had a couple of rushing attempts as well. He ends the year with 19 total touchdowns. It was a great 2-year run for Joe Horton, who over the last couple of years alone had 35 touchdowns. Now he is only an 82 overall, but he does have one more year of eligibility. Will be interesting to see maybe somebody that goes to the FBS because he is a graduate. He did graduate from Brown in 4 years. So we'll see if he does that option or if we somehow see him at the NFL level. Also getting first team All-American is Travis Mullins, a sophomore from Grambling State. The sophomore ends up with 112 catches, 1,500 yards, and 14 touchdowns on the year. Also chipped in for 5 carries and 21 yards. His team did not make the playoffs, but we'll see if Grambling State can turn that around next year. And of course, Mike Sapp has to be a first team nominee. Dude ends up as the best return man in all of college football down here at the FCS level. So of course he gets that final first team spot. Moving on to the tight ends, we got Obi McFarland. How about that for a first name? Definitely was inspired by some Star Wars stuff. He was a great red zone threat for Eastern Kentucky this year. 37 catches for 650 yards, 8 touchdowns though. You love to see that from your tight ends. First team nominee, no surprise there, and doing it only as a true sophomore. Moving on to the offensive line, and this offensive line is dominated by North Dakota State once again. 3 of the 5 do get first team All-American designations. James McClellan does end up as a first teamer for New Hampshire. He got to play in the national championship game, helped keep Carlos Montoya clean the entire time. He did not end up getting touched at all. But North Dakota State, once again, had the best offensive line in the country. Chris Black, a true freshman. He's a first-team All-American. Brian McDonald, who's also a true freshman. He becomes first-team All-American from the left guard position. They both played, they're listed at left guard. They might have played at different spots, though. Seth Hickman, the Remington Award winner, he ends up winning first-team All-American honors from center. And then rounding out the offensive line, we got Keith Payne, the sophomore right tackle, ends up with 94 pancakes, 4 sacks, and won the Best Offensive Line award. Moving on over to the defensive side of the football, we got Jason Pleasant, a first-team All-American who participated in the national championship game. He ends up with 57 tackles, 13 sacks, and a few forced fumbles. So given he is an FCS All-American, we'll see if he does try to leave for the NFL. He's got solid stats to work with, and he has the production to back it up over his last couple of years. So we'll see if that is something that Jason Pleasant decides to do. For the other defensive end position, though, they give it to Aaron Houston, a senior redshirt, who ends the year with 12 sacks and 5 forced fumbles. So that is well deserving of first team honors. Followed by Ryan Simmons, the sophomore defensive tackle from Chattanooga, the Lombardi Award winner, also gets named as a first team All-American. As for the final defensive tackle position, that goes to Cole Perkins, a true sophomore from Rice University. The first team All-American ends with 11 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 24 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Moving on to the linebackers, Tavita Bean ends up getting first team honors as a national champion to go with it. Dude had a great season and was on some award finalist list for that reason. As for the rest of the linebacker core, Matt King gets first team All-American, the Bednarik Award winner, as well as the best linebacker in the country, gets treated as such, becoming a first team All-American for South Dakota. And for the final outside linebacker spot, that goes to Anthony McConnell, who was on multiple award finalist lists. Moving on to the corners, we got Marcus Riley, the freshman redshirt from Eastern Carolina. He was a ball hawk for the Pirates this year. 8 interceptions, a forced fumble, and not to mention 3 defensive touchdowns. He helped create offense as a defensive player. For the other cornerback spot, they're giving it to Jeff Lee, the 5'9" corner from Central Michigan, ends his collegiate career of a season with 5 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a defensive touchdown to his name as well, so deserving of those first team honors. For the safeties, we got Garrett Reed, the sophomore from New Mexico State, with 3 interceptions and forced fumbles, so congratulations to Garrett Reed of New Mexico State. And for the final skill position spot for first team guys, the Jim Forpay Award winner Tim Boyd, the junior strong safety, once again being a ball hawk and part of a great defense that helped slow down Georgia Southern enough to win a national championship. Finally, for the kickers and punters, Sam Bolden does get first team honors and is a Luke Groza Award winner. As for the other kicker spot, they do give it to Austin Griffin, first team All-American for Eastern Kentucky. He won the best punter award. Moving on now to the second team All-American list. We start with the quarterback position. We got Robert Johnson, who did end up winning the Heisman Trophy this year. Robert Johnson did playing in his final collegiate game, but the 5'11" quarterback could get some NFL interest, as we have seen 5'10", 5'11" quarterbacks succeed at the NFL level, such as Kyle Murray, and we also seen Russell Wilson succeed for a very long time as well. Moving on to the running backs, though, Roger Murray gets second team All-American. He was a finalist for the Maxwell Award for this season. He was a good running back for Texas Southern. Kyle Anderson, though, was the one that ended up winning the Walker Award, though. He also gets named second team All-American. Moving on to the wide receivers, though, we got Corey Dahl with second team All-American honors. He ends up with 77 catches for 1,290 yards and 14 touchdowns on the year. Corey Dahl did play his last season. He was a JUCO transfer that was able to get into the FCS level after year number 1. And he was a good pickup for the Towson Tigers. He was very productive. Don't know if he ends up making it to the NFL or not. Probably won't, but he did make the most of his 2 years of Division I college football. Also in this group of wide receivers, we got Michael Williams, who will receive second team All-American honors. He was the best wide receiver award. Surprised that he only gets second team All-American. That was really interesting to me. Probably will be the highest picked FCS player in this year's NFL draft going into year number 3, but we'll see how the NFL draft shakes out. You truly never know with that kind of stuff. But we do also have David Fourn in here as well. He was a Heisman finalist, and they give him second team All-American honors. As for the tight end position, they'll give it to Tim Martin, the sophomore tight end that won the best tight end award for the Central Michigan Chippewas. As for the offensive line, we see AJ Love get in here as a second-team All-American who did play in his final collegiate game and did get to play in the national championship game, so you love to see that. As for the rest of the offensive line, we got Jason Noah, a true freshman, 43 pancakes and allowing just 1 sack. Jason has a very bright career ahead of him, and seeing as he already won second-team All-American, that's a very good sign. As for the rest of the offensive line, Nate Kuehl gets in there. He was a finalist for the Remington Award. He ends with 35 pancakes and 4 sacks as a true freshman. Ronaldo White also getting All-American honors. He had 47 pancakes over the course of the season and not allowing a single sack either. You love to see that. And finally, rounding out the offensive side of the ball for second-team All-Americans, we got Ben Suber, who ends his year with 91 pancakes while also only allowing a singular sack. Up next, we have the defensive side of the football. We got Brandon Wiggins from Southern Missouri State. He had a good year, even though Southern Missouri State did not get a lot of love in gameplay action. He ends his year with 56 tackles, 29 of which were behind the line of scrimmage, 14 sacks as well, and a couple of forced fumbles. So even though his program did not get a lot of attention this year, they had a very good season, him specifically. As for the other defensive ends position, we got Nicholas Johnson, the sophomore defensive end from Western Illinois. The Leatherbacks lineman ends with 33 tackles behind the line of scrimmage, 14 sacks as well, and a forced fumble. He was certainly a bright spot for a terrible Western Illinois squad. For the defensive tackles, we got another Southern Missouri State guy, Patrick Williams, who gets in as a true freshman. 64 tackles, 25 TFLs, did not force any fumbles, but he reached double-digit sacks, so created a nice duo here with Brandon Wiggins clearly. Rounding out the defensive line, we got Will Manning, the sophomore defensive tackle, who ends up with 8 sacks and 2 forced fumbles as well. Moving on to the linebacking core, though, we have the sophomore outside linebacker, Chris Brewer. The second-team All-American ends with 23 tackles behind the line of scrimmage, 16 sacks to go with it, and a few forced fumbles. Also in this group is a true freshman, Raymond Spencer. The second-team All-American had a great debut season, ending with 96 tackles, 30 of which were behind the line of scrimmage, 13 sacks, and able to force 5 fumbles as well. He was truly a menace for the Eastern Kentucky Colonels. Finally, at outside linebacker, we got sophomore Terry Johnson, representing for North Carolina A&T State. Part of an ascending group for the Aggies here. He had 96 tackles this year, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 4 forced fumbles. He did a little bit of everything for North Carolina A&T, and I look for that to continue as he develops as a football player. In the corners, we got Tim Blunt, the junior redshirt from Idaho, getting the first corner spot at second-team All-American. He ends his year with a couple of sacks, got an interception and a few forced fumbles, did a little bit of everything. Teams tend to be scared to throw in his general direction. Then we also got Travis Jackson, the senior redshirt from North Dakota State. In his final collegiate season, he had 3 sacks, 4 interceptions, plus 2 defensive touchdowns as well. So we've seen a guy who has produced pretty well, 6 career interceptions. He's got 11 pass breakups as well. 5'11" is not that big, and he is only an 80 overall. I don't know if that will be good enough for him to make it to the NFL. As for the safety spot, we also have senior safety Darren Clark. In his final collegiate season, he put together a couple of sacks, 3 interceptions, but was mostly an enforcer, ending the year with 5 forced fumbles. Stephen Green gets the other safety spot, though. He ends this year with 4 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a sack as well. Only a sophomore, though, representing for Texas Southern. Finally, for the kickers and punters, we see Paul Parker, who was a finalist for the best kicker in the country award, and Alex Sims was a finalist for the best punter. He gets second-team All-American. So we move on to the players leaving stage here of this offseason, and as you can see, we got quite a few guys that are, transferring to different schools, and this is a byproduct of, FCS teams building themselves up. There's going to be some guys that are, going to go ahead and, transfer to other schools to try to get bigger opportunities. But with that being said, we got a couple of your custom guys that are actually transferring. To start things out here, we start with Brian Ramsey from Tennessee Martin. He ends up transferring out of the Skyhawks program. He was a backup last year. He's going to be looking to transfer over to, it looks like, to the University of Delaware. Now, Brian Ramsey, he was solid in his true freshman campaign. He ends up 3 for 4 for 37 yards. He's a good quarterback as well as the Detroit, Michigan product. He's a 78 overall. But with that being said, Brian Ramsey doesn't think he's going to start anytime soon. So he looks to transfer over to the Delaware Blue Hens. Also transferring out of the program is Trent Williams from South Carolina State. He actually loses his starting job to Little Horn Shepherd, realizes that he's never going to start over him. He is also going to leave South Carolina State and is going over to Florida A&M, and that would be a massive pickup if Florida A&M does end up accepting him. He had a good 2-year career with the South Carolina State, but just more talent at that linebacker position, and he was the odd man out. So, huge pickup there in the transfer portal for Florida A&M. In addition, we will see Tyler Murray transfer out. He was a guy that was backing up there for a couple of years, but he's moving on over to Northern Arizona. Now, Tyler Murray had a couple of solid seasons under his belt. Particularly this year was pretty solid. 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Did come in in relief when the starting quarterback was hurt. This is a huge loss for the Hornets, though. He is a really good quarterback, and he was a really good insurance policy, which Northern Arizona will be more than happy to take in. But that is not all, though, as we have multiple high-profile transfers throughout the FCS college football land. We got Daryl Falk for starters, a sophomore outside linebacker. He is going to transfer to Alabama A&M. Chris Palmer of Georgia Southern, he was the backup tight end behind Aaron Smith. Also realized that he wasn't going to start in front of Aaron Smith, as he was also a sophomore. So he is leaving the Georgia Southern football program and going to Alabama A&M as well. In addition, we see Mike Carlson, the sophomore tight end from the Citadel, leaving for Sanford. He was also a backup for the Citadel Bulldogs. Kevin Falk, a sophomore free safety. Now, this is a surprise, as he, saw the field quite a bit in his sophomore year, but must have not liked the culture at Weber State with those NCAA sanctions, and as a result is going to move over to California to play for San Jose State. Meanwhile, William Mitchell, he was someone that also saw the field plenty over the course of this year. Got 81 total touches, but that was not enough for him specifically. He will transfer over to Florida Atlantic over in the Sun Belt. Meanwhile, Marquise Bryan, with all that talent at middle linebacker, he is going to transfer within the conference, and he is going to play his college football now at Idaho State. Huge pickup for the Bengals within that Big Sky Conference. But in addition to some chaos in the transfer portal, we will go ahead and say goodbye to some of the better players in the FCS Dynasty. Most notably, we say goodbye to Micah Williams, who was the most highly rated player in the series, a 96 overall, who won the Best Wide Receiver Award, and not to mention also managed to win, or at least be a part of the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So he is going to graduate. We also will say goodbye to guys like Adam Logan. He will graduate from North Dakota State. He was a really good fullback for the Bison, and he will try to make it to the NFL in spite of being a fullback. We'll also say goodbye to guys like Carlos Mullins, Barrett Hassan, who's had some good plays for Eastern Carolina over the year. Mike Sepp, who's the best return man in the country. He is going to graduate as well, and he will try to make it to the NFL as well as the best return man in college football. Eric McRae, he was an impact player for Tennessee Martin. He will also graduate, as he was a senior redshirt for the Skyhawks of Tennessee Martin. Also saying goodbye is Albert Miniachi, a second-team all-conference player who amassed over 2,400 all-purpose yards over the course of season number 3 and help with that national championship push. Also making leaving its way is Robert Carter, a senior redshirt for Towson, standing at 5'10", 212 pounds. He was an impact player for the Towson Tigers. Damian Parrish, however, he was a 90 overall too. He's a senior redshirt, standing at 6 foot and 190 pounds. Damian Parrish might have a legitimate shot of making it to the NFL if any of these teams are willing to draft a kicker. Of course, we do have to say goodbye to Carlos Montoya as well. He does graduate from the FCS level, a second-team All-ACC nominee. He also led his team, of course, to that national championship. Also saying goodbye is Joe Overstreet. He was a really good quarterback as well for Grambling State. Could not lead his team to the FCS playoffs, but over the course of 3 seasons, he ends up with 68 touchdowns and 20 interceptions, and also had a completion percentage of 73%. That could get NFL scouts' attention, even though Grambling State did not have that much national exposure. Other players that are going to try to say goodbye that are notable and are actually leaving early, we got Howard Abdullah, the junior redshirt from FIU. He's going to leave the Panthers 1 year early to set out for the NFL, so best of luck to him. He was a first-team all-conference guy over in the Sun Belt. We also will say goodbye to Bo Scott, who will also leave a year early. The junior from North Dakota State, he had 32 pancakes and just allowed 1 sack. He was a second-team all-conference nominee, so best of luck to Bo Scott. In addition, we have Tim Boyd, the Jim Forpay Award winner. He is actually going to leave a year early, whether he makes it to the NFL or the FBS level. And that's something that I would like to try to go ahead and do in the future. Once EA college football comes out, maybe we can see some of these better FCS players. If they don't make it to the professional ranks, maybe see them in our FBS dynasties that we do in the future, especially once EA college football comes out. Also leaving pretty early actually is Chad Wilson. He's only a sophomore, but he's going to leave for the NFL, and I honestly don't blame him. He's already a first-team All-American. He already has proven that he is him, and he wants to go get his money. Also looking to leave early is J.J. Workman, the junior redshirt from Troy. He had 620 yards and 8 touchdowns on the year and will not stay for his senior season. Also leaving early is Doug McClellan, the junior right tackle from the University of Ohio. At 6'4", 299 pounds, he feels like he's got that NFL size and the production to back it up. He ends up with 31 pancakes and 3 sacks allowed over the course of the season. In addition, we'll see Jason Pleasant actually forgo his senior year, as the first-team All-American will leave Georgia Southern. So whether he ends up in the NFL or at a higher program within the FBS, we'll have to wait and see with the NFL draft portion. But he is a first-team All-American and feels like he has production to be NFL ready. Also looking to forgo their senior year as well is Derek Gallinger, the junior redshirt from Tulane, with 31 pancakes and only 1 sack allowed. Also has really great size, 6'7", 325 pounds as well. Definitely is an intriguing prospect for the NFL. Speaking of intrigue, Michael Sledge has some intriguing stuff as he is going to leave Chattanooga a year early. The second-team all-conference nominee ends up with 34 tackles, 3 interceptions, and a forced fumble. Looks like he will likely, if not going to the NFL, he'll go to an FBS program for his senior year. Also looking to go to the NFL is Brian Newton, the junior redshirt from San Diego State. 36 tackles, 13 TFLs. He also had multiple sacks and a forced fumble. Brian Newton was also a second-team all-conference nominee. Continuing the brain drain here at Georgia Southern, we have Ryan Merriman, a junior right tackle, standing at 6'6", 320 pounds. He did start in the national championship game and was a first-team all-conference nominee with 79 pancakes and 2 sacks allowed. He will also look to transfer to an FBS program. Also looking to leave their program a year early is Sam Robertson, the junior redshirt from Akron. He had a great season with 870 receiving yards, 10 total touchdowns, and a first-team all-conference nominee. He will forgo his senior year to go for the NFL dream. Also looking to leave a year early is Rod Bennett, the junior left tackle from Northwestern State. He had 58 pancakes and only allowed a couple of sacks as well. He got second-team all-conference nominee, and he will be transferring upward to a FBS program. He's currently eyeing LSU. Also looking to leave a year early for the NFL dream is Jesse Bentley, the junior running back from UNLV. He had 1,200 yards on the ground plus 170 receiving yards as well, and chips in 9 total touchdowns. So he is a first-team all-conference nominee and will look towards the NFL as he forgoes his senior year. Also looking to forgo their senior year is Josh Hadley, the junior redshirt from Tulane. He ends up with 890 yards and 6 touchdowns and will forgo his senior year, also going for that NFL dream. Speaking of Tulane, they will also say goodbye to Bruce Smith, the junior redshirt running back. He had 728 yards, 9 touchdowns on the ground, plus he had a few catches for 38 yards. More of a power back, but he will also be looking for an NFL role. Speaking of chasing that NFL dream, Dennis Rhodes wants that, as he is going to nearly have 1,000 yards receiving with 11 touchdowns. Standing at 5'11", 179 pounds, the San Diego State product will forgo both his junior and senior year to go for the NFL. Speaking of going for the NFL, Derek Vaughn also wants that opportunity, as he had a solid season, 50 tackles, 15 TFLs, 7 sacks, and a forced fumble. The North Texas product will forgo his senior year to go for the NFL draft. Also going for not necessarily the NFL draft, but he will transfer up to a higher program, is Chad Maxwell. Chad Maxwell is a junior from James Madison. He had 30 tackles, 16 of which were TFLs, and 5 sacks to go with it as well. And Chad Maxwell, he is currently eyeing either Old Dominion or Virginia to go play his senior year. Also looking to leave their senior year is Gordon Lawson, as Gordon Lawson is looking to move up and play for the Kentucky Wildcats for his senior season. He had 73 tackles, 14 TFLs, 5 sacks, and multiple turnovers forced on the year. This is a huge loss for the Hilltoppers as they move into season number 4. Also leaving a year early is James Mead from Central Michigan. The right tackle had 26 pancakes and 4 sacks allowed during his junior year, and will forgo his senior year for the NFL draft. But that is all in regards to some of the more notable transfers, as well as people leaving early to chase either NFL dreams or to transfer to an FBS program. Now we'll go ahead and see who ends up getting drafted out of this series in order to go to the NFL. So this year we actually did end up seeing a dozen guys from the FCS Dynasty get drafted into the ranks of the NFL. We'll start with the highest drafted FCS player, and so absolutely a surprise to nobody, Micah Williams. He was selected with the 25th pick in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, and he is going to go to the Miami Dolphins. The 23-year-old from Western Carolina is going to get a nice role here early in his career. He's going to be a wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins as of right now. He's going to slot in as a slot receiver who, while he needs to work on his route running, he does have pretty solid catchability, and he can stop on a dime. Not to mention he can contribute on special teams as well for Miami. Also being drafted in the 3rd round is the strong safety out of Tennessee Martin, Eric McCray, standing at 6'1" and is 23 years old. He was the 2nd to last pick in the 3rd round of the NFL draft as well. He is going to be a 3rd string safety for the New York Jets, but does have an opportunity to move up potentially and maybe even be a backup. Moving into the 4th round of the NFL draft, though, we had a few players picked here, a few quarterbacks. The first quarterback taken off the board, though, was Mike Hill, Mike Hill is going to be a 59 overall. He was selected with the 9th pick in the 4th round of the NFL draft. He was a multi-year starter for the Southern Jaguars as well, who's got some solid throw power. Will need to work on his accuracy as well as several other things, but does carry decent mobility, and he is a very tough football player. Did lead the Southern Jaguars to the FCS playoffs back in year number 1. But the quarterback for the national champion New Hampshire Wildcats will also find a home as well in the NFL. With the 27th pick in the 4th round of the NFL draft, Carlos Montoya is going to go play for the Atlanta Falcons. He's going to start out as a 3rd-string quarterback for them, but has some solid traits. We know that he is a great competitor. He did lead them to that national championship FCS playoff appearances in their first 3 years. Has solid accuracy in the short stuff, but needs to work better on his deep and medium accuracy. Does have a pretty good arm, and of course is a tough quarterback, a great competitor that the Falcons will enjoy having. But maybe the biggest sleeper in this draft is who was selected in the final pick in the 4th round, Robert Carter. He's from Towson University. We only saw him in gameplay a couple of times, but that being said though, when we did get to see a chance to let him play, he looked really good in gameplay, and he has a hidden dev trait, so he could, bare minimum, be a star, but he has a huge arm. He's got a massive cannon for an arm. He has really solid accuracy, actually. Needs to work on some things, time to well-round his game a little bit more. Can't really make many defenders miss, but really curious to see what that dev trait is for Robert Carter down the road. He will start off initially as the 3rd-string quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. But now we jump into the 5th round, as we see with the 6th pick within the 5th round of the NFL draft, we see North Dakota State's Bo Scott get drafted by the Chicago Bears. The 21-year-old did leave school a year early, and even though he left school early, he's still going to be a day 3 pick. Could have stayed one more year and maybe get himself into the first few rounds, but he was trying to get that money now. Proved that he didn't really need to do anything else in college, but surprisingly, he specializes as a pass blocking guy, in spite of the fact that in college, North Dakota State mainly ran the football, but that's a weakness for him a little bit. Maybe it's just because he's less than 300 pounds as an offensive lineman. They would like him to beef up a little bit, but he does have some good attributes to work with. Is pretty solid with the pass blocking game. He'll start out as a backup. Also selected in the 5th round of the NFL draft is Joe Overstreet from Grambling State, as the Tigers product will be selected with the 29th pick in the 5th round of the NFL draft. Joe Overstreet definitely knows a thing or two about how to improvise, knows how to lead a football team for sure, in spite of what that field general rating says. He's got a pretty good arm at 88 throw power and can throw the deep ball relatively well as do a nice job of throwing on the run, so he knows how to improvise when asked to. He's actually going to be in a quarterback battle early with fellow quarterback John Wofford in order to compete for the backup quarterback job behind the superstar Lamar Jackson. Moving into the 6th round, we see the New Orleans Saints with the 20th pick in the 6th round of the NFL draft Adam Logan. So we see 2 North Dakota State guys drafted into the NFL. Adam Logan's actually going to get a solid opportunity here. Fullbacks, they may be a dying breed, but teams still typically carry a fullback on the roster sometimes. And for the New Orleans Saints, they're going to go pull the trigger on Adam Logan. So he's actually going to be the only fullback on the roster. So he could have a chance to get some early playing time, particularly when it comes down to playing in those goal line sets. Speaking of North Dakota State guys, we will see Mike Sapp also get drafted. With the 9th pick in the 7th round of the NFL draft, Mike Sapp is going to join the New England Patriots. And Mike Sapp, he is on... Actually, there's a lot of wide receivers on this roster, right? So there's going to be he's going to have to compete for a opportunity for a NFL roster spot. That's not given, but he is the return man of the year. So what that does mean is that he can step in and he can possibly go ahead and contribute in the special teams in that fashion. With the very next pick in the NFL draft, though, the Arizona Cardinals select Chad James with the 10th pick in the 7th round. The Eastern Kentucky product, was a 5-year guy. He did start for an Eastern Kentucky team that did make it to the FCS playoffs for the very first time, and he will get an opportunity to eventually be the backup quarterback. Jimmy G is the backup at this point here to back up Kyler Murray. So Chad James will eventually be the backup, I will imagine. He's got a cannon of an arm, but does need to work on his accuracy as well as reading NFL defenses. In addition, he's not the most athletic player either, only carrying 69 speed. With the 18th pick in the 7th round of the NFL draft, though, we will see Eddie Davidson get drafted here. He is representing well for Southeast Missouri State, part of a really good defense, although it's a very young defense, so he will be the only pro going to the NFL for Southeast Missouri State. But the 7th rounder does specialize in being a zone coverage kind of person. We saw him be a ball hawk at times at the FCS level. He's not the fastest player on the face of the planet, and he's not great at tackling. But that being said, the traits are there to be there. He's got pretty solid instincts, and he's a guy that doesn't get hurt. He will be playing a lot in the NFL if he can find his way onto it to stay on an NFL roster and eventually get playing time. And the final guy from our FCS Dynasty that would go to the NFL is Albert Miniachi. He is going to get drafted to the Seahawks with the 19th pick in the 7th round, representing for Georgia Southern. He's an elusive guy, and we saw that in the national championship and throughout his college career, broke some big runs in the process. He's got really good speed, 91 speed, 87 excel. His ball carrier vision is good. Needs to work on his carrying a little bit. Did fumble football a few times. That's probably why he did end up falling into the 7th round. But he does have a little bit of an ability to go and make some catches out of the backfield. And he can also contribute in special teams as well. He's given that 86 kick return rating here at the NFL level. And I'm really excited for Albert Miniachi. He is going to be the only pro taken from that Georgia Southern national runner-up squad. So speaking of national champions as well as national runners-up, this is the results of the full bracket that we got to see unfold. And I bring this up because I wanted to take the time to announce who ended up winning the bracket challenge this year and got some free channel member level custom prospects. So true freshmen that are going to have a very good chance of contributing very early on in their college career. So who ended up winning the bracket challenge this year was the bracket submission of Hope This Is Right. And then the runner-up was the bracket submission of 45 to 24. So I'm not going to show the full results because it does have listed people's email addresses, and I'm not trying to swat anybody or by any means. But if you do want to check out the full results, I will have that linked down in the pinned comment section, as well as the custom recruit information, that template for how you guys can get involved in this series. So speaking of custom recruits, let me go ahead and explain how custom players work. I will have a template down in the description, but as an incentive for those that support the channel in a more personal way, for my channel membership program, if you go with the $5 tier, that is for the OG tiers, that means you get an overall somewhere between 80 and 85 overall. My day ones tier, which is my $2 memberships, that's for 75 to 80 overall, which, by the way, you guys don't by any means need to go be a part of this channel membership program because it is, I don't require it in order you to enjoy my content. I'm not going to put a paywall up in order to, look at certain content, right? But it is an incentive that I have for those that do want to support me personally, and I do have that link down in the description as well if you do want to check that out and possibly support me in a more personal way. All revenue from the channel does actually go to, creating as much quality content for you guys as possible. But if you don't want to do that and you still, want to, be involved in this community, those that submit through my Discord, you can have a 70 to 75 overall guy. And if you are not interested in any of that, but you still want to have a guy in your series, you will have somebody that's at the very least a 60 overall up to a 69, which we all know is very nice. If you know, you know. So all that being said, have that all explained, let's go ahead and see the best high school recruits in the country, as well as take a look at those recruiting rankings here in the year number 3 offseason recap. So now that we've seen who has won the bracket challenge, as well as took some time to explain how custom players work, let's go ahead and take some time now to see who are the notable signings that are coming in from mainly the high school ranks as well as JUCO, in terms of, who's going to change the face of FCS programs in the future. And this year, in year number 3, the number 1 overall prospect in this year's class is Matt Lawrence. Matt Lawrence from Martinez, California. He is a blue chip prospect, 6'2", 193 pounds. He is going to sign with the Montana Grizzlies, and that is a huge pickup for them. He has elite speed. We're talking about 4.140. They got a B+ field awareness as well. 37.5-inch vertical to go with all of that, and decent hands out of backfield as well. So you want to talk about somebody that is a complete back. Matt Lawrence is one coming out of high school, and Montana is extremely fortunate to have him sign on the dotted line, getting him out of the state of California. As for the number 1 athlete in this recruiting class, also coming out of the state of California, it's Mike Freeman of Livermore. He is the number 1 athlete in this class, standing at 6'1", 202 pounds. He will also end up signing with the New Hampshire Wildcats, and the Wildcats get a nice signing here. Looks like somebody that could potentially move over to quarterback. That is a concern for them, as Carlos Montoya is now in the NFL. I love his field awareness, but one thing that he would need to work on is his arm accuracy. He is a D+ if he decides to move over to cornerback, but he does have a rocket of an arm, and he would certainly have receivers to throw the football to if he does end up realizing that he is able to get those receivers an opportunity to catch the football, and if he can win the starting quarterback job should he move to that position. But not only does New Hampshire get the number 1 athlete in this recruiting class, they will also get the number 1 quarterback in this recruiting class as well, as Kevin Cross out of Linden, New Jersey will stay close to home and play for the New Hampshire Wildcats at 6'2", 205 pounds. Again, looking to address that quarterback position. They are going to have a lot of talent returning, and I'll kind of talk about that later, but in the meantime, he is the complete package. He's got decent mobility for a quarterback, 4.8, that's fine, but he could do everything you can ask him to do. Great field awareness. He's got a B+ in that regard, and he's got an A+ arm strength and A+ arm accuracy to go with it as well. You want to talk about somebody that can step up right away for your college program and start day 1? It's certainly this kid right here in New Hampshire, already with so much talent on this team. They get the number 1 athlete and they get the number 1 quarterback here in season number 3 from the high school ranks. So outside of the number 1 prospect in high school football, there was only one running back with a 5-star ranking who we did see go to Montana, but the next best running back is also from California. A lot of California kids. Brian Bonner. He's from Dana Point, California, standing at 6'2", 189 pounds. He is actually going to go all the way across the country in order to play for the Delaware Blue Hens, who, may I remind you, is the defending conference champions in that ACC conference. he's got really good speed to go with it as well. 4.24 speed. He's got B field awareness as well, a 37.8 vertical, and a C+ hands as well. He's not quite as fast as the number 1 tailback, Matt Lawrence, which is why he is number 2 in my opinion, but still a really good running back that could start day number 1 for the Delaware Blue Hens if he's given that opportunity. Over at the fullback position, because fullbacks are still important in college football, you can argue about that in the comments section, we got Aaron Montgomery from Bethpage, New York. He's the number 1 fullback in this class, and he will sign with the Redhawks of Southeast Missouri State. They are certainly looking for some offensive firepower, as that did held them back, and that was their ultimate demise in the FCS playoffs, losing to Kent State in the quarterfinals. This will help them in that regard a little bit, as you know, he's what you want in a fullback. Definitely has some serious power to him. A 580-pound squat out of someone that's 6'1". So I really like his potential strength that he has, and he's extremely aware as well. A- field awareness, B+ hands, so he can catch balls out of the backfield. Could be a very complete fullback, especially in those goal line sets. He can certainly be a menace to help Tyler Johnson and that Redhawks offense. Now, the wide receiver position this year did have a wealth of talent, and the top 2 guys are actually JUCO guys. Cody Vaughn, who's a JUCO sophomore going to Eastern Kentucky, and then Jared Davis, a JUCO junior from Corpus Christi, Texas. He's going to go to Grambling State, but the number 1 high school wide receiver is Joe Banks of Abari, Louisiana, a blue chip guy, and he is going to Western Carolina. And listen, you want to talk about having some measurables? 6'9". He is a very tall man. He will need to bulk up a little bit because 200 pounds at 6'9", a little bit concerning, but he's a 6'9" guy that has a sub 4.4. That's insane. That is incredible. And he's got a 42.2-inch vertical jump as well. So that is somebody that you can call upon right away to go get yourself a one-on-one ball down the sideline and a red zone threat too. You can throw it to him in the back of the end zone, and he'll catch just about everything. He's got A+ hands with it. A very good pickup for Western Carolina as they continue to build their roster together, as they are still 1 year out from competing from the FCS playoffs. But when they're finally off sanctions in year number 5, watch out. Western Carolina is going for that national championship. Up next, we have the tight end position here, as we do have ourselves Brian Paris. He's the number 1 tight end, but he is a JUCO player from Mexico, Missouri. He will play for Southeast Missouri State, but the number 2 tight end in this class is Reggie Wallace, and he is going to be a college freshman. Representing from Woodbridge, Virginia, the South Carolina State Bulldogs are able to get into the state of Virginia and sign him on the dotted line. 6'5", 220 pounds. He's got really the ideal size for a tight end. Got 4.58 40 dash as well. 38-inch vertical. Catches just about everything. Plus, he can block for you as well. He is a very balanced tight end, and he is an offensive weapon that South Carolina State can start. But outside of the quarterback position, the offensive line is arguably one of the most important spots on the field for an offense to get going. And for these offensive linemen, they're going to certainly help their programs. We'll start with the number 1 tackle in this class, John Nicholas from St. Paul, Minnesota. That's St. Thomas territory, but he is going to go for some warmer weather down south, as the Minnesota product's going to play for Texas Southern. Now, John Nicholas is 6'7", 315 pounds, and he's got great field awareness. He's got an A field awareness. He can pass block. He can run block as well. Not to mention, insanely strong dude. 525 bench press and a 775 squat. Dude can move some bodies. And Texas Southern, they got themselves a starter for sure on that offensive line. As for the guard position, we'll see Jordan Price sign with the Rice Owls, who did make it to the semifinals of the FCS playoffs. Really good guy, 6'5", 275 pounds, but basically tied for first place, though, is Deshaun Dunn from Sanctions, Missouri. He's going out east to play for the Chattanooga Mocs, who recently just made their first FCS playoff appearance. At 6'4", 283 pounds. Here's a guy that could also go ahead and block in both pass protection and for the running game. Dude is very balanced in that regard and just as strong. 515 for the bench press, 720 for a squat, not to mention almost a sub 5 40-yard dash for someone that plays offensive line. You do not find many people that are like him. And rounding out the offensive side of the ball in terms of number one prospects, we got Blake Morgan from Derby, Connecticut. Blake is going to sign with Southeast Missouri State, so more additional help for that offensive line. He's a 5-star prospect who can run a 5.1. He has great field awareness, which is perfect for the center position, calling out those protections for particularly a younger quarterback. Tyler Johnson still going into his sophomore year. And he's able to do what is required in both pass protection and run blocking. He'll help make Southeast Missouri State a more consistent offense here in year number 4. But now we move over to the defensive side of the football, and we start with those defensive ends coming out of Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. Now that is one heck of a name for a town, but Jeremy George certainly fits that description. 6'4", 263 pounds. He is the number 1 defensive end in high school football, and he's going to remain in the Carolinas as he will be playing for the Furman Paladins. Look at his measurables: 4.640 for a defensive lineman. That is incredible. Also has insanely good awareness. Does need to work on being a run stopper a little bit. He gets a little bit too aggressive at times, but he's an elite pass rusher at the high school football level and someone that will make an impact for the Furman Paladins right away. As for the number 1 interior defensive lineman from the high school football ranks, we got Brandon King, straight out of Trotwood, Ohio. He stands at 6 foot, 295 pounds, so certainly got some beef to him for sure. He will sign with the Eastern Illinois Panthers, who are more of an offensive school, but this is a great defensive signing for Eastern Illinois. Someone who is a great pass rusher as well, and that's really rare for an interior defensive lineman, still having that ability to get after the quarterback, because what happens to those defensive tackles is that they're more likely to deal with double teams over the course of the game. So for him to have a pass rushing tendency, that's going to be really key for that Eastern Illinois pass rush and therefore help the defense out. He also has a 4.740, which is really good. He does need to work on getting his weight up a little bit so that he can be a really effective run stopper at the collegiate level, but I really love this guy's potential going into his true freshman year. So up next, we will move on to the linebackers, and Western Carolina gets another number 1 prospect, Brian Robinson out of Powder Springs, Georgia. He's a number 1 outside linebacker with incredible size, 6'8" and 222 pounds. So he certainly has a lot of length, and he can cover a lot of field as well. 4.5 in the 40-yard dash. He's got phenomenal field awareness, a 34-inch vertical too, and not to mention he has decent hands, so that will help him get some interceptions down the road, some more incredible depth for the Western Carolina Catamounts. As for the number 1 middle linebacker in the country, we have Tony Battle, who is a JUCO transfer, but it is a really big pickup nonetheless for the Weber State Wildcats. But we'll also search for who is that top linebacker from the high school ranks, and it looks like it's going to be Darian Hall from Manassas Park, Virginia. Tennessee State, they did not have a great season this year, but they're still going to get some big time signings as they were still somewhat competitive in the Big Ten in spite of their disappointments in year number 3. Darian Hall, 6'4", 223 pounds, can do anything for you. He can stop the pass or the run. Really elite hands, A- hands. He can really catch a lot for a linebacker. He could actually move over to tight end too if you need him to go 2 ways briefly. I know teams are still building out their rosters a little bit, but I love his field awareness. He's got an A+ field awareness, and his 40 time, 4.3. For a linebacker, that's absolutely incredible. Darian Hall should be competing for a starting job right this instant for the Tennessee State Tigers. As for what's going on at the corner position, the number 1 corner is going to sign with James Madison, adding to their skill position repertoire. From Greenville, Indiana, Will Williams stands at 6'1", 175 pounds, and is the only 5-star player that plays at that corner position. He's more of a coverage guy. He's not going to be elite in his tackling right away, and that's something he will need to work on, particularly in the open field, as that really does matter at the collegiate level. But he does have what it takes from a athletic standpoint to compete early at the FCS ranks. He's got a 4.3 40, which is really good for that corner. He's also got A+ field awareness, so he can definitely, he won't get burnt very often. He won't get fooled on the play action. A 44-inch vertical might as well, so he's very competitive in those one-on-one balls, and that's really key against tall receivers too. And those B+ hands help him finish plays, get some interceptions. He's someone that can step in and be an absolute ball hawk for the James Madison Dukes. Stepping on over to the safety position, though, is Jonathan Robinson from Groves, Texas. He's the number 1 free safety in this class and already joining a very talented defense. And that's the crazy part. He's a number 1 guy, and he might not start right away. That's absolutely insane. You don't say that about a lot of number 1 prospects, but it's not because he sucks specifically. It's just that, you know, Southeast Missouri State, they already had one of the best defenses in America, and they're adding on to their ridiculous wealth of talent. Jonathan Robinson certainly fits that mold. Could still play right away for the Red Hawks if need be. 4.4 in the 40. He's got pretty good field awareness at a B+, a 44-inch vertical. That helps, as he is the last line of defense, and decent hands that will help him finish those plays too. Not to mention, he does have a strong bench and squat, so somebody that can bring some people down and will not be trucked very often at the collegiate level. And rounding out the skill position, guys, for its number 1 prospects is strong safety Robbie Shelby from Washington, Indiana, also signing with the Red Hawks. This has been a very good defensive class for Southeast Missouri State once again, as they are turning into a DBU here at the FCS level. They did just send Eric Davidson to the NFL as a 7th-round draft pick, and it seems like more are on the way. Robbie Shelby also will be someone that could get some playing time right away, in spite of the talent that's already on this roster. He's got a 4.3 40 time with absolutely incredible field awareness, so he won't get caught in the open very often. A 41-inch vertical, which is really good to have, especially for one-on-one situations, and B+ hands that'll allow him to be a ball hawk, and this secondary will certainly not be tested anytime soon. So finally, we go to the kickers and punters, and we do see a 5-star kicker in the works. Isaac Hollis of Jackson, Alabama. He's going to be a number 1 kicker in this class, and he's going to sign with James Madison. Going to have a really long range. Definitely expect him to be somebody that will be a great value brand. Greg Zerline as well as Justin Tucker. And a 5'1" 40 is actually not bad either for a kicker, which is really interesting to see. And then over at punter, we have Daryl Booker from Darien, Illinois. He's going to sign with the Western Carolina Catamounts. Kind of same deal for him. Not as great of a kicker in terms of his accuracy, but you know, more than capable of hitting 60 and 70 yard dots, especially in terms of that coffin corner. Really capable of flipping the field for Western Carolina. He should also be starting in his true freshman year. But now we will go ahead and check out the recruiting rankings that we see here in year number 3. And one thing that I'm not going to do, I'm not going to go through like every single team in depth, just because that would take too much time, and this video is, you know, already a longer video for, you know, as much of a deep dive that we want to take for this dynasty, right? But what I will do is I'm going to go over the top 25 classes, as well as recruiting classes for other teams outside of the top 25 that did make the FCS playoffs this year. I will have a full recruiting ranking in the description. It will be a Google Sheet, so you can go ahead and check that out if you want to see the full rankings. But we'll go ahead and jump right into the number 1 class in college football, and for the second year in a row, it goes to Southeast Missouri State. They do a great job of putting together yet another phenomenal class. They signed 25 freshmen this season, and they're bringing in some really high-end talent. I mean, we saw them. They're going to bring in a solid, offensive lineman and fullback, but they also signed multiple other 5-stars. They signed Brian Paris, the tight end from Mexico, Missouri. He's going to be an immediate impact in that passing game to help bolster what was an inconsistent offense in year number 3. And then they're also going to bring in 2 really high-end safeties, Jonathan Robinson and Robbie Shelby as well. Not to mention another 5-star. Overall, they bring in 4 5-star guys, 11 4-stars, and they bring in a number 1 class in year 2, another one in year 3, and I really feel that Southeast Missouri State, they are really close to truly being a national championship contender, depending on how things go in terms of their improvement on the offensive side of football. Now, another program that has brought together a pretty good class in spite of not signing any 5-star guys is North Dakota State. They put together the number 2 recruiting class. We saw them lose in the quarterfinals to what was at the time the defending national champions, Kent State, in the quarterfinals. But even though they don't bring any 5-star players, they do a really great job in terms of the depth that they are bringing in. They're bringing in 17 4-stars, which is absolutely impressive. So top to bottom, really, this is the deepest class I think North Dakota State has. I think they're the most deep in terms of recruiting in the nation. Southeast Missouri State is higher because of that high-end talent. But few of those guys that they're bringing in Joe Powdrell. That's going to be the eventual replacement for Ken Anderson, I would imagine. And then they're also getting some help on the defensive side of football as well. Terry Kramer is one of them. He's from Fruit Heights, Utah. He's a 4-star at the middle linebacker position. There was somebody from North Dakota State that did transfer from that linebacking core, so that was essentially to replace him. And then Ashton Robinson is going to come from the outside. He's also a 4-star player from McAllister, Oklahoma. Again, really deep class and a really great job for the Pac-10 Conference champs. Now, this was a little bit of a surprise, though, in terms of recruiting prowess. The Montana Grizzlies put together the number 3 overall class. Now, Montana on the field wasn't that great this year. 7-5. They barely make it to the FCS playoffs. They lose in the first round, but off the field, they're doing a pretty good job. Number 3 class. They do have the number 1 player in high school football, Matt Lawrence. He signs with Montana, but he's going to get some help as well on offense. Clint Chavez, he's a high 4-star from Tustin, California, and he is going to come in and he's going to make an immediate impact, at least challenge Travis Slaughter for that starting quarterback job. Not to mention they will get some meat up the middle of the defense. Kyle Sanders, he's a defensive tackle from Apple Valley, California. He's also going to be a 4-star signee for the Montana Grizzlies, one of 14 4 and 5 stars that they are bringing in. And this was a pleasantly good class for Montana, who looks to bounce back after a somewhat disappointing year 2 and 3. They haven't really done much damage since their deep playoff run all the way back in year number 1. Now, the defending national champions, they put together a top 5 recruiting class, so they should be in it for the long haul for sure. Here's the scary part about New Hampshire. I was checking this out while putting together the starting lineups for you guys in the national championship episode. New Hampshire is bringing back 20 of their 22 starters. I want that to sink in real quick. A lot of those players that were starting for New Hampshire were freshmen and sophomores. This is a team that is capable of putting together a dynasty. They look like they could very well run FCS college football for a while. And the one question mark that they had was at quarterback. Who's going to take over for Carlos Montoya? And we saw with the individual prospects, they're bringing in 2 really good options. Mike Freeman, he's a 5-star athlete from Livermore, California. He would need a little bit more seasoning, but someone who could be a little bit more prepared to play right away is Kevin Cross. He's the #1 quarterback. He's from Linden, New Jersey. He's a 5-star as well, and he's someone that is certainly capable of starting right away as a true freshman. And listen, he doesn't have to be a Carlos Montoya. He just needs to be the best version of himself if he does win the starting job out in spring football, which, you never know what could happen. They do also bring in some more reinforcements on the offensive line as well. Chris Whitaker from Sudley, Virginia. He's another 5-star, and this is just a quality offensive class for New Hampshire as they're looking to not rebuild, but reload, as they are now going to have a massive target on their backs as defending national champs. Coming in at number 5 in recruiting, we got James Madison. They did end up losing in the quarterfinals as well to Georgia Southern. Now, this is not as good of a class as we saw from James Madison, but I mean, still a top 5 class. You can't really complain about it. It is built up from a rarity that we see here in NCAA 06. So in 06, you occasionally see 4- and 5-star punters and kickers as well in these recruiting classes. And James Madison, they got a 5-star punter back in year number 1. They got one here in year number 3 as well. They get Isaac Hollins, who's a kicker from Jackson, Alabama. He's technically their highest rated signee, so I'm guessing he's going to be the highest overall freshman on this team, who will be starting right away. They do also get Will Williams on the outside as well from Greenville, Indiana. He's the other 5-star that comes through this class. And then they get some more reinforcements on the offensive line. Randy Jacobs from Mandeville, Louisiana. He's a high 4-star, so it's a pretty good class. It might be elevated by that 5-star kicker, so it might be in outside the top 5 truly, but that's where the game has them, and that's what we're going to be rocking with. Speaking of Georgia Southern, we see them here at number 6, and one thing that we did notice, Ikeda Woods did come back for his senior year, so that's a massive deal. And knowing that Georgia Southern, they focus on getting him some additional offensive weapons now that Albert Miniacci did graduate and is going to the NFL. So that being said, they did bring in 10 4-stars, 11 3-stars as well. Georgia Southern, they do bring multiple offensive linemen, Matt Reed and Peter Bell, who are both high-end 4-star players. They're going to be chasing for that national championship. That window is limited for Georgia Southern. Ikeda Woods, he's a very special player. I don't know if you're going to find an option quarterback like him ever in this series, as long as this is still running. So with that in mind, they focus more so on the offensive side of the ball, get him some day 1 playmakers, and Georgia Southern's going to get after it here in year number 4, as they were so close to winning that national championship, losing by a field goal. We'll see what ends up happening with them. We'll see if they can make another deep run here in year number 4. Coming in at number 8, we actually have our very first non-playoff team in the top 25 recruiting rankings. It's the Tennessee State Tigers. They finished 5-6 overall. They were competitive for the most part in conference play, but they did a little bit better in the non-conference. And while they weren't a playoff team, obviously, this year, they still put together a number 8 class. So that will help them get back on track, which, it doesn't seem like there's a huge difference between the top and bottom of this conference. So that should really help them elevate this program. Tennessee State, they did, I believe, go to the FCS playoffs in year 2. They missed it here in year 3. They bring in a 5-star vote in Jeremy Love. He's an athlete from North Potomac, Maryland. He could be a very special player. We'll see what position he ends up playing moving forward. But a couple of other 4-stars to watch out for. Lamar Young out of Batesville, Mississippi. That will help a young quarterback room find a go-to wide receiver in the receiving game. And then on the defensive side of football, they're going to be led by Patrick McCauley among the defensive signings from Royal Pines, North Carolina. He's a high-end 4-star as well. At number 9, we have the biggest surprise here in year number 3, the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens. So they made the FCS playoffs, surprisingly. No one was really talking about them much throughout the regular season, but they snuck their way into the conference championship. They play New Hampshire, and they were ironically the only team to beat New Hampshire all season long. And that's why, you play those games in actuality. They're never decided on paper, right? You got to actually play them, and Delaware's using this momentum to put together a top 10 class as they look to get in more so without having to rely on that automatic qualifier bid. Their main signing was Paris McPherson, who's a 5-star athlete from Elmhurst, Illinois. He's the 5-star of this group, but some good complementary pieces here as well for Delaware. Brian Bonner of Dana Point, California. He's a 4-star signee on the offensive side of the football. And on the defensive side, we got Jason Frank, the free safety from that city of Brotherly Love, who's also one of 4-star players that Delaware signs. This could very well be a program on the rise as they look to ironically get into the FCS playoffs for the first time without that automatic bid. Their playoff berth back in year number 1 was also from winning the ACC championship. Now, Western Carolina is currently under NCAA sanctions, but even though they only have 15 scholarships to work with, they made the most of them as they signed the number 10 overall class. This class is mostly offensive oriented, with Joe Banks, the 5-star from Abori, Louisiana. That is going to be the Micah Williams replacement, who is now a 3rd-round selection in the NFL draft. They do also get Lawrence Thomas, who's a really good running back from Fort Stewart, Georgia as well. He's a high-end 4-star. He'll be really good for Western Carolina as well. But just in case that offense sputters, they get 5-star punter Daryl Booker from Darien, Illinois, who will obviously be starting right away over in special teams. Up next, we have the Big Ten champions, Eastern Illinois, who do end up getting the number 11 overall recruiting class. And that's doing so in spite of not having any 5-stars. That is the second class that we've covered so far that did not get a 5-star player, but some good 4-stars in here for Eastern Illinois as they sign Thomas Weber. That is their highest signing. He's going to be a offensive guard from Chester, Virginia, who's a 4-star player. Brandon King, who you guys know is the number 1 defensive tackle. He's also part of this group as well. And then finally, Corey Lee, the 4-star quarterback out of Westerly, Rhode Island. Corey Lee did end up leading his guys pretty well into that Rhode Island state championship. And now he's going to try to go to Eastern Illinois here and see if they can keep things rolling here. John Robinson has graduated, so there is an open quarterback battle here at Eastern Illinois. At number 12, we have yet another team that did not make the FCS playoffs, but they do get ranked in the final AB poll. The Furman Paladins, they are 7-4 overall with a 5-3 conference record. They signed the number 12 overall class here, and that includes 2 5-stars, one of which is Jeremy George, who is the number 1 defensive end in this recruiting class, but that wasn't even the only defensive end that they get. They also signed Greg Davis for the opposite side as well. A 4-star from Medina, Ohio. This duo is going to be tough to stop for any offensive line in the SEC moving forward. But speaking of that offensive line, they get some major reinforcements with 5-star Maurice Willis, an offensive guard from Altamonte Springs, Florida, who will look to start right away for the Furman Paladins. As for Chattanooga, they put together the 13th overall class here as they were the number 24 seed, and we'll look to improve on that, trying to build some momentum for their program. They do end up with 1 5-star this year, with Deshaun Dunn being the sole 5-star from this class. He represents Sykes-Town, Missouri, but then they also got 2 really high 4-stars, almost 5-star players, but not quite. Austin Brown, who is another offensive lineman, building that protection for Jerry Jackson or whoever ends up starting for Chattanooga, since he actually graduated. Did not realize that. But on the defensive side of football, they do also get Nate Freeman from East Point, Georgia, and that will certainly help as they play against more pass-heavy teams. They were exposed in the first round of the FCS playoffs against New Hampshire. Up next, we have South Carolina State with the number 14 overall recruiting class. South Carolina State, they made the FCS playoffs in year number 2, but could not make a lot of noise. And while they were kind of close to getting it here in year number 3, they were a few spots short ultimately from that opportunity. They still signed a pretty solid recruiting class, though, mainly focused on athleticism. 2 of their top 3 signings are considered athletes. Luke Crosley from Pompano Beach, Florida, and Jeff Revis from Ozark, Alabama, looks to provide flexibility for that South Carolina State roster in light of losing a couple of people to the transfer portal. They do also sign Keith Davis as well, the 4-star from Clarksdale, Mississippi, who is also a 4-star signee. Couple of spots down, we got the Texas State Bobcats, who, in spite finishing 4-7, this was a rough year for the Bobcats, but certainly some things to build off of as well. They will have Mac McJones, who really had an excellent season for Texas State. They just could not really stop much on defense and not necessarily addressing that as much. One of their top 3 signings is on the defensive side of football. It's Brian Bennett, who's a strong safety from Cape Pecos, Texas. He is a 4-star signing, one of 7 4-stars, so it's a very quality class for the Texas State Bobcats. But their main improvements were on the offensive line. Joe Armstrong and Roderick Rice do sign with Texas State, and they're both 4-stars. They'll be looking to protect McJones as he continues to develop as a quarterback. We'll see if Texas State can take that next step and have a winning season here in year number 4 potentially. Speaking of the SEC, Sam Houston State is in the top 25 as well. Sam Houston State, they were in the conference championship game, but they did lose to Georgia Southern. They're actually blown out by Georgia Southern, but they do sign the number 17 class, a really solid class for the Cardiac Cats. They are led by Mario Simon from Belmead, Texas, and they really hampered that Texas area too. Kenneth Long also comes from the Lone Star State. He's a 4-star from Keller, Texas. And on the defensive side of the ball, the Bearcats also get Justin Carlson from Marshall, Texas. He will also be an immediate impact player for the Bearcats defense. Following Sam Houston State, we go across the country for number 18 in the nation, the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks, who also really struggled this year. Northern Arizona, they were a program that nearly made it to the FCS playoffs in year number 2, but they did not quite make that happen, right? They were close, but no cigar. Year 3, they took a huge step back. There was some surprise instability in this program, and Northern Arizona are going to try to right this ship. They put together a solid class, but all of their main signings are at the linebacker position, though. Ted Harris, David Sawyer, and Will Hancock, they're all middle linebackers, so I'm curious to see if, one or two of them get moved to outside linebacker or not. All very talented, obviously. They both got 4 stars for a reason, but if they all stay at middle linebacker, I'm afraid that maybe one of these or 2 of these guys might end up transferring to other schools through the transfer portal, unless they run a free 4 or something a little bit more exotic that gets all these middle linebackers on the field. At number 19, we have the Big 12 champions, Texas Southern. So while they didn't get a chance to compete in the FCS playoffs because of NCAA sanctions, they do finish the season on a high note with the conference championship. They also finished with a top 25 class, and what I've been noticing is that these schools that don't have the full 25, they only have 15, they really have to focus in on bringing in a better quality of player, because their scholarships, they count even more, right? So that's a huge deal. And for Western Carolina, not only for them, but for Texas Southern specifically here, they made that happen so far. They do end up signing 8 4-stars out of 15 signees. So a very quality class for the class size that they bring in. And the most notable recruits here are Ron Sapp, Ed Rose, and Lenny Higgins, both all on the defensive side of the football. 4-star guys that represent the state of Texas. As for Southeastern, they will also dive into that state of Texas. Despite not being a Texas college, Southeastern had a solid year number 3. We're close to making it to the FCS playoffs as well. They were in the conversation towards the end, but can't make that happen. They do end up with 5 4-stars and 8 3-stars as well for the number 20th class in the country, all of which focusing in on the defensive side of the football. William Neal and Ron Phillips will look to upgrade the defense as they are both 4-star signees, while Joshua Grover provides more flexibility for the roster as well. The 4-star athlete from West Loco, Texas, will look to get on the field in some way, shape, or form. As for Weber State, they were the weakest of the NCAA sanctioned schools that did end up, not participating in the FCS playoffs because of it. Now, Weber State wasn't ranked, so they weren't even getting in even without the sanctions. So you do that as you wish. They also, just like Texas Southern, signed a really good class overall. 8 of their 15 signings are either 4 or 5-star players. They do sign 1 5-star, speaking of that. It's Tony Battle. He, I believe, is a JUCO transfer, so that'll be a big boost to the Wildcats defense right away, hailing from Santa Rosa, California. But he also signed a couple of notable 4-stars here too on that defensive line. Chase Crow and Stephen Monclure will look to form a young duo as they look to build Weber State into a playoff contender after year number 4, when their NCAA sanctions will finally be lifted. Rounding out this top 25 recruiting group, we have Sanford. They have the number 22 class in college football. They focus on the defensive side of the ball with David Hawley, Ray Guillory, and Doug Holmes playing on the defensive side of the ball. They were close to making it to the playoffs as well, but no cigar. They are still searching for their first FCS playoff appearance in this series. Speaking of first for everything, Sacramento State is in that conversation as well. They signed yet another top 25 class, and they feel really close to being in that playoff conversation. They were close this year, just lost a couple of uncharacteristic games towards the end. But they're right there in that picture, and they're number 20 in the final AP poll. So we'll see if year 4 is finally the year where Sacramento State makes it to the FCS playoffs for the first time. And speaking of first, how about the Jackson State Tigers being in here? Now, this is a different coach than what we see in real life. Deion Sanders is not coaching Jackson State. Otherwise, they'll be in a little bit of a better shape, I would say. But still number 24 in the country in terms of recruiting. That's really good to see. They're building themselves up. They are the first school that we see on this list, though, that is not at least 3 4-stars. They do only bring in 2 in this class. Micah Mitchell and Richard Sapp are those 2 4-stars, both from the state of Mississippi, so homegrown kids. They do also get outside the state of Mississippi, though, as they get Adam Wade, who's a 3-star athlete that'll look to help Jackson State get that winning season and maybe put themselves in conversation for their first playoff berth. But even outside of the top 25, we still see a few intriguing teams here that did make the FCS playoffs, but could potentially be taking a step back here in year number 4. Eastern Kentucky is one of those examples, as they were number 16 in the final AP poll, but their recruiting class is outside of the top 30. Now, they did end up signing a couple of high-end players. Cody Vaughn is the most notable from North Madison, Ohio. He is their only 5-star in this class, but they also only bring in 1 4-star as well. That's Terrence Mason, all the way from Green Acres City, Florida. He will come all the way up to play college football at Eastern Kentucky, as there is an open quarterback battle here as well, with Chad James moving on to the NFL opportunity. But a good defense that they can build around. We'll see if they can sustain their success, as they did get the first taste of FCS playoff action here in year number 3. Another team that had kind of a disappointing recruiting season was North Carolina A&T. Now, I did mention in the past that they are a program on the rise, but this could slow down that upward trajectory a little bit. They only signed the number 42 class in the country, and the ACC with teams like New Hampshire, James Madison, Delaware had a top 10 recruiting class. They made the playoffs too. Florida A&M, we saw them a little bit, didn't talk about them necessarily, but they are getting better too. The ACC is extremely competitive, and we'll see if this hurts them long term, but they do sign 1 4-star in Jamal Green. He's an offensive lineman from Plant City, but other than that, not a great class. Adam Pugh and Ross Brown are okay, but as your top signings, could be a lot better. We'll see if North Carolina A&T, in spite of the lack of talent compared to some of these high-end teams, what they're bringing in for their freshman class, can they still repeat in terms of making another FCS playoff appearance going into year number 4. And finally, the last team that I wanted to talk about here in the recruiting rankings is the Yale Bulldogs. Now, the Yale Bulldogs, they won the Ivy League for the first time here in year 3, and they made their first FCS playoff appearance because of that, but they also got put under NCAA sanctions for the next couple of seasons. So for years 4 and 5, they will not be making a FCS playoff appearance, and they will also be limited in their scholarships. 15 total scholarships to their name, And unlike some of those other schools that we talked about previously that really focus in on the quality, there's not a ton of quality in this class. Now, the Big East, they have really struggled in this dynasty. These Ivy League schools not really establishing themselves on a national level yet. So, again, there's not a lot of difference between top and bottom. But Yale, they do sign a couple of 4-stars. Jake Andrews and Sean Vincent, both going to reinforce that defensive side of the football from Dortmund, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. And then their only other notable signing is Joel Green. He's a quarterback from Newport Beach, California. But thankfully for them, Adam Abrams does come back, so he can sit behind him for a little bit. But Yale, they might be going in a negative direction here due to those NCAA sanctions. But with that being said, that will actually wrap up the offseason recap here as we now march on to the start of year number 4. And next episode, we will have that season preview. We will go ahead, we'll check out the preseason All-Americans as well as that preseason Heisman race that will surely have the man on the cover, Ikeda Woods, on it. We'll also go ahead, and in addition to all that, we'll check out all of the custom players that are being introduced into this series as true freshmen. Plus, what we are going to do on top of that, we're going to take a look at those week 1 games, see what we got going on as we start year number 4. But it's been a really exciting season. I can't believe we made it through 3 seasons of FCS college football already. And I hope you guys are excited for year number 4 coming through to us soon. And if you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button. Look at that comment section down below if you want that custom player in this series, if you want to be included in that. And of course, if you're brand new to the channel, on top of it, make sure you go ahead, smack that subscribe button. If you do happen to be brand new, this is John J. Gaming on the mic signing off, but I'm hoping you're all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.